Every great thinker has been misquoted, misunderstood, and defanged by history. But few have been betrayed as completely as Friedrich Nietzsche. His words were twisted into banners for tyrants, domesticated by academics, diluted into slogans for self-help books. His warnings turned into comforts, his dynamite into flowers. But if you cut through the noise and the lies, if you read Nietzsche as he wrote, not as they wanted him to sound, you will discover his secret lesson, one so dangerous that even today it remains unspeakable. You must become the villain. Why? Because morality itself has been built to make you weak. Society does not reward strength, it rewards submission. The laws of good and evil were not written by gods. They were written by the powerless as weapons against the powerful. The herd, trembling before lions, declared that the lion was evil and that meekness was good. The strong were condemned as cruel, arrogant, selfish. The weak were sanctified as humble, obedient, righteous. Morality is not truth. Morality is strategy. It is the revenge of the herd against the exceptional. Nietzsche called it slave morality, the inversion of values that turns power into sin and weakness into virtue. In the ancient world, the strong were admired. Nobility was measured by what you could do, not by how well you obeyed. But as the herd multiplied, as the priests gained influence, they rewrote the script. They called suffering holy. They called obedience noble. They declared humility the highest virtue because humility protected them from the judgment of the strong. And so slowly, generation after generation, strength was demonized and weakness was glorified. This is the morality you inherited. If you obey it, you will spend your life on your knees, apologizing for your hunger, hiding your will, disguising your ambition, waiting for forgiveness from people who secretly envy your strength. You will live as a good person, praised for your restraint, admired for your submission, and forgotten as soon as you die. Because goodness, as the herd defines it, is a strategy to neutralize you. It is a leash around your neck. Nietzsche's secret lesson is that you must tear off that leash, even if it means being called evil. Especially if it means being called evil. Because what is a villain? A villain is not one who revels in destruction for its own sake. A villain is the one who refuses to obey the script. The villain is the lion who does not apologize for his hunger. The villain is the one who dares to affirm his will, even when the crowd screams blasphemy. The villain is the one who stops living as a slave to the values of others and begins creating his own. This is Nietzsche's greatest command, to become the creator of values, the legislator of your own morality. And anyone who does this will always be painted as the villain by the herd. Think of history's great rebels. Socrates, condemned for corrupting the youth. Jesus, crucified for defying authority. Galileo, silenced for refusing to deny truth. Nietzsche himself, ostracized, ridiculed, and broken. They were all villains in their time. They all broke the rules written by the herd. And every time someone dares to live by their own law, rather than the law of the crowd, the herd cries, evil, dangerous, wicked. But beneath the accusations lies fear, the fear that their prison of morality will be exposed for what it is, chains, not truths. Nietzsche warned that morality's greatest trick is to hide its origins. People believe good and evil are eternal categories, written into the cosmos. They believe humility is naturally noble, that meekness is naturally holy, that obedience is naturally virtuous. They forget that these values were invented at a particular time, by particular people, for particular purposes. They forget that morality has a history, and that history is written in blood and envy. The herd resented strength, so they condemned it. They feared freedom, so they outlawed it. They hated their own weakness, so they sanctified it. And over time, the lie hardened into law. If you want to live freely, you must see through this trick. You must recognize morality for what it is. Not a truth, but a tool. Not divine, but human. Not eternal, but historical. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You begin to notice how every call to be good is really a call to be obedient. How every demand for humility is really a demand for you to stay small. How every celebration of sacrifice is really a mask for someone else's gain. And then you begin to realize, to truly live, you must step beyond good and evil. You must embrace what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, the one who creates his own law. And to the herd, the Übermensch will always be the villain. But here is the cost. Becoming the villain is not easy. It means you will be hated. You will be accused of arrogance, cruelty, selfishness. You will be feared, misunderstood, condemned. The crowd will throw stones, not because you are wrong, but because you are free. They cannot forgive freedom because it exposes their chains, and so they will do what they always do, call you evil. But Nietzsche's secret lesson is this: their hatred is proof of your strength. Their condemnation is the confirmation of your freedom. If they call you villain, it means you are no longer their slave. This lesson terrifies people because it demands courage. It demands you give up the comfort of being praised as good. It demands you endure isolation, rejection, and fear. It demands you stop excusing yourself. Stop apologizing for existing. Stop begging for moral approval. It demands you live by your will alone, without the crutch of someone else's commandments. And most cannot bear this. They cling to morality because morality spares them the burden of freedom. It tells them what to do, when to do it, how to live, how to die. To abandon it is to step into the abyss, and only a few can walk there without trembling. This is why Nietzsche said, "You must become who you are." To become yourself is to become a villain in the eyes of the herd. Because the self is not meek, the self is not humble, the self is not obedient, the self is will, hunger, ambition, creation. And when you live as yourself, the herd will call you evil. But in that moment, you will finally be alive. So the question is, will you dare? Will you accept the chains of morality, praise for goodness, and the safety of slavery? Or will you embrace freedom, accept the price of being condemned, and become the villain you were meant to be? Comment below. Are you willing to carry the name evil if it means being free? Subscribe if you dare to continue walking through Nietzsche's darkest lessons. Share this with someone who still clings to their halo, and watch how quickly they turn to anger when it is threatened. Because Nietzsche's secret lesson has been hidden for centuries, not because it is false, but because it is dangerous. And if you are still listening, if you are still here, you already know. Danger is the beginning of power. The first step in Nietzsche's secret lesson is recognizing that morality is not eternal truth but invention. But recognition is not enough. To live differently, you must act differently. And to act differently, you must perform what Nietzsche called the transvaluation of all values, the revaluation, the overturning, the complete rewriting of the categories of good and evil. This is the heart of his philosophy, the abyss at which most turn away. Because to overturn values is to admit that your entire life has been built on illusions. It is to accept that the commandments you inherited, be kind, be humble, obey, sacrifice, were strategies designed not for your freedom, but for your domestication. The herd cannot accept this. They cling to morality because morality gives them meaning. It spares them the terrifying burden of choice. If morality is absolute, then they never have to decide what to value. It has already been decided. But Nietzsche says, no, values are not given, they are created. And the creator of values is always the villain to the values that came before. Imagine a world where obedience is praised as good and disobedience condemned as evil. Now imagine the one who dares to disobey. To the herd, he is a monster, a danger, a corrupter. But from his disobedience comes the possibility of something new. a new law, a new morality, a new order. Every creator of values begins as a villain. Socrates was called the corrupter of youth. Prometheus was called a thief. Nietzsche himself was called mad. The herd always uses the same weapon, demonization, because to call someone evil is to justify their chains. This is the essence of the transvaluation. You must take what the herd calls evil and see it for what it truly is: strength, independence, freedom. And you must take what the herd calls good and see it for what it is: obedience, weakness, conformity. You must invert the inversion. You must reclaim the noble values buried under centuries of resentment. To do this is to make yourself a villain in their eyes, but a creator in truth. But Nietzsche goes further. He asks, what will you do with this freedom? What will you create once the old morality is burned? His answer is the doctrine of the will to power, the fundamental drive of all life. Not survival, not comfort, not peace. Power, the expansion of strength, the overcoming of obstacles, the growth of the self. Every being strives not simply to persist, but to grow, to dominate, to impose form upon chaos. Even weakness seeks power, though it does so by disguising its hunger as morality, by taming the strong with guilt. The will to power is universal, and to embrace it openly is to embrace the role of the villain, because nothing terrifies the herd more than someone who admits their hunger. Look at the language of the weak. They condemn ambition as arrogance, desire as greed, dominance as cruelty. Why? Because they cannot match it, and so they call it evil. But Nietzsche tells us, you must not be ashamed of your will. You must not apologize for your hunger. You must not bow to their accusations. To live fully is to affirm your will to power without disguise, without apology, without shame, and the herd will always hate you for it. Their hatred is proof of your authenticity. Then comes Nietzsche's most radical idea, the eternal recurrence. He asks you to imagine this, that your life, exactly as it is, will repeat itself forever, down to the smallest detail. Every joy, every failure, every betrayal, every humiliation, endless repetition. Could you embrace it? Could you affirm your life so completely that you would live it again eternally, without alteration, without regret? To say yes to this is the ultimate test of strength. It is the mark of one who has transcended the herd. Think of what this means. The herd lives for escape, for a heaven after death, for a redemption beyond the grave, for a compensation in another world. They endure weakness because they hope for a reward later. But eternal recurrence destroys this hope. It forces you to face life not as a waiting room for heaven, but as the only stage you will ever have. And in this stage, you must live so fiercely, so fully, so freely, that you could repeat it forever without despair. To achieve this, you must stop living as the good man who waits for approval. You must live as the villain who writes his own script, even if the crowd condemns it eternally. This is why Nietzsche says, "Become who you are." It is not a slogan of self-help. It is a command to embrace the fullness of your will, even when it contradicts morality, even when it scandalizes the herd, even when it paints you as the villain. To become who you are is to accept that your hunger is not sin, your ambition is not evil, your strength is not cruelty. It is life itself, demanding expression. To deny it is to betray yourself. To embrace it is to step into the abyss of freedom. But here is the danger. Freedom is unbearable for most. To create your own values means you can no longer hide behind tradition, religion, or morality. You can no longer say, "I am good because I obeyed." You must take responsibility for your creation, for your strength, for your failures. And this responsibility terrifies people. They would rather live as slaves with halos than as free men called villains. Nietzsche says, "Let them. You were not born to be one of them." Look around you today. Do you not see how the same tricks still bind people? ambition condemned as greed, desire condemned as selfishness, strength condemned as toxic. Everywhere the herd invents new commandments to keep the exceptional apologizing for their exception, and everywhere the exceptional retreat, afraid of being called villains. Nietzsche's lesson is to stop retreating, to stop apologizing, to wear the mask of villainy with pride, knowing that the insult evil is nothing but the fear of the herd given a name. This is why Nietzsche was hated in his time, and why he is still hated now. He stripped away the illusions that protect the weak. He told us that morality is a weapon, not a truth. He dared to affirm life without consolation, without heaven, without excuses. He dared to say yes to existence, even in its cruelty, even in its chaos. And to the herd, this affirmation is evil. But to those who dare, it is liberation. So ask yourself, do you dare? Could you revalue all values, destroy the morality you were taught, and build your own? Could you affirm your hunger without shame, your ambition without apology, your will to power without disguise? Could you embrace your life so fiercely that you would live it again eternally? If you can, then you are already walking the path Nietzsche marked. You are already becoming the villain he told you to be. Comment below. Would you embrace your life if it repeated forever, or would you recoil in despair? Subscribe if you want to keep diving into Nietzsche's darkest truths. Share this with someone who still clings to the illusion of eternal rewards, and watch how fiercely they defend their chains. Because the eternal recurrence spares no one. You either affirm life as it is or you deny it forever. And denial is the only true evil Nietzsche ever recognized. To understand Nietzsche's secret lesson is one thing. To live it is another. Anyone can read about slave morality and nod. Anyone can admire the courage of the so-called villains of history, the ones who dared to write their own law. But when the moment arrives, when you must step beyond good and evil and embrace your will, you will feel the full weight of the abyss. It is not abstract. It is not academic. It is a blade pressed to your throat asking, will you remain a slave to morality? Or will you become free enough to be called a villain? Nietzsche knew how hard this choice is, because he lived it. His life was a monument to isolation. He rejected the herd's values, but he was not rewarded with applause. He was condemned, ridiculed, abandoned. His books barely sold. His peers mocked him. His family betrayed him. The herd branded him mad, evil, dangerous. And yet he never retreated. He never crawled back into the comfort of morality. He embraced the loneliness of freedom. He accepted the role of villain, because he understood that history always calls its liberators monsters before it calls them visionaries. But how does this apply to you? How do you live as Nietzsche's villain without descending into nihilism, without becoming a caricature of cruelty? The answer is this. By recognizing that being the villain does not mean reveling in destruction. It means creating values, even when those values scandalize the herd. Villainy in Nietzsche's sense is not sadism. It is authorship. It is the courage to say, this is my law. This is my meaning. This is my life. And I will affirm it, even if the world hates me for it. This is what he meant by the Übermensch, not a tyrant dripping in blood, but a creator of values. A human being who no longer borrows meaning from gods, governments, or traditions, but who writes meaning into existence with their own hand. The herd will always see such a figure as a villain, because their freedom exposes the chains of everyone else. But villainy here is not destruction. It is creation. Creation so radical it feels like blasphemy. So what does this look like in practice? It means refusing to apologize for your will, refusing to shrink so others can feel tall, refusing to live by commandments you did not write. It means choosing your path even when others call it arrogant. It means creating work, art, truth, or power that the herd may despise, but that you affirm as yours. It means embracing solitude rather than living in chains disguised as community. It means saying yes to your life, not the life morality prescribed. but the life your will demands. It also means rejecting the poison of resentment. The herd lives in resentment. They envy strength, but cannot match it, so they call it evil. They envy freedom, but cannot claim it, so they declare it arrogance. To become the villain, you must rise above this pettiness. You must not waste your will on bitterness. The villain Nietzsche describes does not whine, does not blame, does not curse the herd. He simply walks his own path, indifferent to their screams. He is hated not because he seeks hatred, but because he refuses obedience. And here lies the danger. Once you step into this role, you will be alone. Nietzsche never hid this. The path of the villain is the path of solitude. Friends may leave, families may condemn, societies may exile, you may be ridiculed, demonized, even destroyed. But Nietzsche's question was never about comfort. It was about greatness. He asks, do you prefer to be loved as a slave or hated as a creator? Do you prefer to be remembered as good or to live as free? History answers the question brutally. The saints of morality are forgotten. The villains who created values are remembered. Prometheus, the thief of fire. Socrates, the corrupter. Jesus, the blasphemer. Galileo, the heretic. Nietzsche himself, the madman. Every one of them condemned. Every one of them reviled. And every one of them immortal. Because greatness always comes wearing the mask of villainy. The herd never applauds when the lion roars. They only applaud after he is dead, when his teeth can no longer bite them. So the question for you is this: will you dare to roar while you live, knowing you will be called a villain? Or will you wait to be celebrated as good after you are already dead, when it no longer matters? Nietzsche forces you into this corner. He offers no third way. If you cling to morality, you are a slave. If you create your own values, you are a villain. There is no comfortable compromise. The world will not allow it. And that is why his philosophy is dynamite, because it leaves you no escape. To live as Nietzsche's villain is to embrace the eternal recurrence. To live so fiercely, so freely, that you would live it again eternally. To say yes to existence even when it condemns you. To smile in the face of hatred. To carry the insult evil as a badge of authenticity. To write values into the void with your own hand. And when the herd howls, to recognize that their screams are the truest confirmation of your freedom. Now ask yourself, do you want freedom or do you want approval? Do you want to be remembered as good or do you want to live as yourself? Do you want the warmth of belonging or the frost of truth? Comment below. Would you choose to be hated but free or loved but enslaved? Subscribe if you are ready to keep walking into Nietzsche's abyss. Share this with someone who still clings to their halo, and watch how quickly they call you dangerous for threatening it. Because this is Nietzsche's secret lesson. You must become the villain. Not because cruelty is noble, but because obedience is death. Not because hatred is strength, but because freedom will always look like evil to those who fear it. And if you are still here, still listening, then you already know the truth. The halo was always a chain, and the chain must be broken.